Hello, Garland Nixon, and we are going to talk about the Uhuru movement. I think there's more to this FBI raid than meets the eye. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and man, I'm having a time here, but that's okay. Okay, here we go. Oh, got it all good. Rockfin looks good. Everything looks good. What the hell? It's gone. I am having a time. Hmm. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm showing on Rockfin again. All is well. All right, so we're going to talk about the Uhuru movement, and I think it's important to talk about this. Um, I think it's something we need to understand. Um, so let's what's happening. So the Uhuru movement is it's a group, it's an organization. They are pro-African. They are anti-imperialist. They are anti-colonialist. And if you listen to what they're saying, it's they believe that the United States and Europe have been oppressing the African nation and African people and people all over the world, South America, all over the world. And their aim is to, set that straight. They're nonviolent. They're not a violent organization, no guns, no nothing. If you listen to what they're saying, you can understand why the U.S. empire doesn't like them. It would go after them. It's very COINTELPRO-ish. Um, but what happens is when people see an organization or a group like that, they make certain assumptions. I do want to play a little bit of what one of their head guys has to say. Everything that I've seen shows that this is not some kind of a cult, or this is not some kind of a group of crazy people or whatever. This is a group of people who oppose the U.S. empire. They oppose empire and they oppose colonialism around the world. And the reason in my opinion, that the FBI is going after them. The reason that the U.S. is going after them is because they're unabashed. They support Russia in this Ukraine thing and this Ukraine operation, whatever you want to call it. They believe and they argue that it's the colonial nations, that it's the colonial powers around the world that have all joined up against Russia, and in their eyes, in their mind, it appears that Russia is opposing the colonial and imperialist countries. They support the Palestinians, and they believe they're being treated unfairly. So if you listen to what they're saying, you understand why the empire doesn't like them. But there's something I want to say. I'm going to play a video, but there's something that I want to say. I think that this is a very dangerous thing because it's an opening salvo. When you look at everything they've done, and I've reviewed as much as I can, this is me. I don't see anything that they've done wrong. Remember, they have not been charged with any crimes. They have not been charged with anything. They wake up, and again, look what happened. I mean, these are ideologically opposed people, but they're outside of the mainstream. Look what happened to what's his name? Let me name some people. Max Blumenthal. When Max Blumenthal was pushing back against the Venezuela embassy issue, right? They came to his house with guns and SWAT teams and arrested him and on some bogus claim that he had assaulted one of these right-wing Venezuelan, or shall I say the U.S. empires, the Juan Guaido, forget the wing, the Juan Guaido people had accused Max of doing something. They came to his house with a SWAT team and grabbed him. Look at Roger Stone and some of those people in the Trump investigation. Roger Stone's there. I think his wife's deaf. He doesn't have any guns. He's not threatening anybody. They come to his house, with guns out with SWAT teams. When they come to people's houses who have no, oftentimes older people, Roger Stone, I don't know how old he is, but I imagine he's in his 70s, people who don't pose any legitimate threat to anybody. Max Blumenthal, he doesn't have any guns. He's an anti-war person. When they come to these people's houses and they're bashing down doors, these people, they don't have any guns, no violence, no nothing, right? They bash their doors down. They throw stun grenades in. They come in with SWAT teams for what? They weren't even, nobody there was charged with a crime. They didn't commit any crimes. They, somebody ran for office. I think they argued for reparations. I think they argued against imperialism. They have advocated on behalf of Russia. But keep in mind something. Yes, there's a war between Ukraine and Russia. The United States is not officially a part of that war. So it's like right now, if there was a war, for instance, when there was something going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia. You know what? In the United States, one person could have stood on one side of the street and said, I support Azerbaijan. And somebody could have stood on the other side of the street and said, I support Armenia. It was perfectly legal and constitutionally protected to say that. The United States is not in that war. If the United States officially declares war on another country, some of those things may change, do change, certainly legally. But the US ain't technically, legally not in that war. So if they want to say that the United States is an imperial power and they support Russia because the empire and the colonial powers are all ganging up on Russia and Russia's fighting against imperialism, if they want to say that, if they want to make that point, if they want to put it on the internet, if they want to hold it up, or the other way around, that's constitutionally protected speech. Now, if you listen to what they're saying, they didn't get money from Russia. They didn't do anything. A couple of them ran for office. And think about all this on the news. SWAT teams, doors broken down, stun grenades, and not one of them is charged with a crime. Do you do all that when they didn't do anything illegal? They exercised their constitutional rights, but they opposed the official position of the US government. And that is unacceptable. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to actually play a video. Hopefully, if I don't screw it up too bad, I'm going to try to figure out how to play a video. And so you can hear the sound. And I want you to listen what the guy says. Let me say this first before I play the video. It's on YouTube. And that is that this is very dangerous because I think this is the opening salvo. Look, they know that the Democrats are going to get wiped out in November, right? What are they going after with them? Well, they're working with the Russians to influence elections. They know they're going to get wiped out. This is not going to be the last. All of us who have groups and organizations and YouTube channels and all these other things who say, I don't agree with the neocons in Ukraine, or I don't agree with what's going on with the Palestinians or Venezuelans or whatever country is your country that you're concerned with, right? You know, I think going into November, they're going to start. They always start with a group that's easy for them to demonize, right? Regardless of what they're saying. It's easy for them to demonize. So in the same way that many of us said, look, you better be careful. You better support Julian Assange because there will be more. This is the opening salvo. Yeah, now look what's happening with the woman. I think her name is Lippin in Germany. She's a German citizen, and they're saying that she may get 3 years in jail in Germany simply for reporting on the Ukrainian, honestly, reporting on the Ukrainian crisis in a manner that she felt was journalistically necessary, right? Responsible. Graham Phillips, US citizen. See, that's what comes from Assange. It starts there, and they use that to spread that out. This is not the end of it. They're going to start off. These people aren't charged with a crime. How do you send a SWAT team to break somebody's door down, throw flash grenades in, and come in with guns, handcuff these people, and nobody gets arrested because nobody committed a crime simply because they oppose NATO in Ukraine? That's what this is about. They've been around for 50 years. But now all of a sudden, Ukrainian crisis happens and they say, we agree with Russia. These people got to be dealt with. They won't be the last. People should be very wary. People should understand what's going on here. Now, what I'm going to try to do is play a video. So you listen to this guy. If you have any reason to doubt what I'm saying, the reason that they're going after him and that there will be more. If you think, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about, there's some kind of a crazy group, I'm going to play what this guy has to say. You listen to what he has to say. This is the leader of their group. And you tell me they're a bunch of crazy people. You tell me they don't make sense. Now, let me, you know, I'm from Maryland, and, you know, I'm old school. So I don't say let me, I say lemmy. Okay. Let me see. Tab, share audio. Let me go here. Boom. Let me go here. Okay, so this is the guy, and I want you to listen to what he has to say. Do me a favor. As soon as I start playing it, I believe the audio is there. I want you to please, Reckless Abandon and Chicken Patty, can you guys, as soon as it starts playing, can you say to me, let me know that that the audio is playing okay? This is the guy, his chairman, Omali Yeshitela, and he's responding to the African part. Now you listen to this, and after you hear this, you won't have to guess why the FBI is going after him. Let's check this out.
But more than that, it's really important for you to know the role, the advanced detachment, the revolutionary role, the vanguard role of the African People's Socialist Party. They're saying somehow the Russians are responsible for our position. They say this man, Alexander Ionov, who I met in Russia. I went to Russia on 2 different occasions, and I met him at a conference of nations that was involved in the question for self-determination. Black people, African people need to be self-determining, self-governing people in the United States and around the world. They want to keep us fighting against racism and the ideas in the heads of white people. They want to keep us fighting to make white people like us, as opposed to fighting for our own power. The African People's Socialist Party was founded something like 50 years ago in May, and for the purpose of continuing the struggle for black people and oppressed peoples around the world against colonialism. They try to destroy the memory of the people that what we are fighting for is against colonialism. And so, at the African People's Socialist Party, by ourselves, mostly for 50 years, have been pursuing this struggle against colonialism and uniting with all the peoples around the world. So they said, I went to Russia, but white people go to occupy Palestine, that they call Israel, every day of the week. And they work with other white people to steal the land, kill the people, Arab Palestinian people, that they don't say anything about that. And guess what? It's not just the Russians that we support in Ukraine. We support the Palestinian Arabs in occupied Palestine that they call Israel. We support the people who are in Nicaragua, who have made their own revolution against U.S. puppets there. We support people who are fighting against oppression everywhere, and we support the Russians in this war that's being made against Russia through Ukraine, in an instance when the United States government overthrew the elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and since that time have killed 13 to 14,000 Russians or Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine who support Russia. So this bogus thing that they're saying is requires of people ignorance by people around the world of this history. And it requires ignorance of the people around the world of the role that the United States has played. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that overthrew the elected government of Iran in 1953. They want us to forget it was the United States government that overthrew the government of Benz in Guatemala in 1954. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that organized a coup attempt against Hugo Chavez some years ago. They want us to forget that it's the United States government that tried over and over and over again to assassinate Fidel Castro. These are people who were in power in their own governments, but they had disagreements with U.S. foreign policy, because U.S. foreign policy was designed to keep them living under colonial domination. And black people here, they think we forgot they killed Malcolm, that they killed Martin Luther King, that they had killed Lumumba, that they overthrew Nkrumah, that they killed Sankara, that they've done all this mayhem around the world. And in 1968 alone, they killed something like 30 members of the Black Panther Party. And in 1969, they murdered Fred Hampton. The Russians didn't do that. The U.S. government did that. And guess what?
Entrepreneurs, leaders, executives.
All right. Now, here's what I have to say. Now, do you understand? Now, listening to what this man has to say, do you understand why the FBI busted down their door? Do you understand why the FBI said, you know what, we cannot have these people saying what they've got to say? We cannot have these people standing up for what they believe in. I listen to this guy. Does that sound like, oh, he's a madman? Because, but keep in mind something. Look what they're doing. He's telling the truth about history. He's telling the truth about what's going on in the present. He's telling the truth about what the FBI did. No wonder the FBI. Exactly right. You're right, Mark Donovan. What this man gave was facts. Did he sound like some kind of a crazy person, some kind of an extremist? There was nothing extreme about anything that he said, number one. Number two, he has a right. He has, and his organization has a legal right to say what it is that they want to say. They've got a legal right to take those stances, and that's the stances they were taking. So, I would suggest everybody should. I'll share that video. I will share that if I can find it. I need to share that video. Everybody should watch the whole video, because, and I tell you why. One of the things, and people who know me and people who know how I think, that know how I do. Let me see. Let me do this. Let me play a little bit more, because I didn't play all of it. Let me play a little bit more, because there's still a little bit more. So let's go here. Let me play the last minute. I think you should hear the last minute of it before we do this.
To keep them living under colonial domination. And black people here, they think we forgot they killed Malcolm, that they killed Martin Luther King, that they had killed Lumumba, that they overthrew Nkrumah, that they killed Sankara, that they've done all this mayhem around the world. And in 1968 alone, they killed something like 30 members of the Black Panther Party. And in 1969, they murdered Fred Hampton. The Russians didn't do that. The U.S. government did that. And guess what? They want to say that we are taking money from the Russians. They said the Russians supported some campaign that we did to get people to support black people at the United Nations, who were exposing the fact that genocide, according to U.S. conventions, United Nations Convention, is being committed against black people. And they say that this was the idea of the Russians. The Russians paid us to do this, and guess what? That thing that we put up on social media, on internet, has got more than 100,000 supporters around the world, because everybody knows what the United States government has done to black people, and they think they can terrorize us into silence.
So there we go. I think you understand now. I think it should be obvious if you watch this guy, what the deal is. First of all, he is a black person, so he's advocating against imperialism, and he's advocating against what there we go, my favorite floppy hat. Look, it's not unreasonable there's nothing he's saying that's unreasonable. And doesn't his organization have a right to say there is a war in Ukraine? And the United States is not a party to that war, has not declared. So there are two sides. And so his organization says, we support the Russian side. I think legally and constitutionally, the United States is not involved in that conflict. Officially, he has a right to pick a side, and their position is it's better off for the people that he represents, that it stands, that he believes. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but constitutionally, legally, he's saying that he believes that it's better off for the people that he represents, that it's better off for the moral, political, geopolitical positions that they're taking against empire and against colonialism, that it's better for that position for him to support Russia, that Russia's right. And then he goes into history and he talks about the U.S. overthrowing Ukraine, and he talks about the Russian-speaking people that have gotten killed. That's a moral position. Come to think of it, that's not a political position. He's not saying, politically speaking, I agree with Russia. He's saying from a moral perspective, The U.S. overthrew the government of Ukraine, and that's wrong. From a moral perspective, the government, the 13 plus thousand Ukrainian civilians were killed, and that's wrong. And he's saying the United States has a history of, supporting the wrong side and overthrowing governments, etc. And so his organization says they believe that Russia's fighting on the right side. I don't have to say, everybody knows where I stand, but I don't have to take a position on that. I can say, looking at his organization, it is that what he's doing, what they're doing is a protected speech, and it's not extremist. If you can make a solid moral argument for your position, then how's it extremist to say it's wrong for a government to overthrow the government of another country? Is that an extremist position? It's wrong for that country to then shell and bomb civilians and kill 13,000 civilians. Is there something wrong, or is it something extremist about taking that as a moral position? That's his position. And then they compare it to Palestine and the Palestinians. And he says, why is it that you can go and support Israel when they're mistreating the Palestinians, and the FBI doesn't knock down your door? And he says they support the Palestinians. He says, well, but yet if I say I support Russia over whatchamacallit, that's what he's saying, then the FBI is at my door, which he's answered his own question. That's why the FBI is at his door. So you should watch the video. Oh, you know what? Let me do this. I'm going to take the video and I'm going to put it in the chat, and I'm going to try afterwards. That's his video. I just put it in the chat, and I think people should watch it. I think people should watch it and make their own decisions. I'm a big believer in that. I'm not trying to advocate for or against this group, but I do advocate for the law. I do advocate for the Constitution and our constitutional rights and freedoms. And I say, here's an organization that says, let me say this. Let me make another point. The most valuable organizations, if you've got a bunch of friends, and let's say you got a drinking problem, and a bunch of your friends say, hey, you know what, it's your birthday, here's a bottle of liquor. They ain't doing you any favors. But if you got a friend that says, it's your birthday, can I come over and talk to you? You say, sure, come by. And he sits down and says, Garland, I love you, you're a good guy. Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Happy birthday. Yeah, but look, man, I want to tell you something. Between friends, I got your best interest in hand. You've got a problem drinking. You really need to stop. You're hurting your friends, your family, your job, blah, 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 blah. Isn't that your best friend? Isn't your friend the candid one that comes to you and says, you have a problem and this is it? People are upset at you. Or let's say you do something to hurt somebody's feeling. They come to you and say, that little interaction you had with Bob the other day, yeah, that you should go apologize to Bob. That wasn't right. You're not living right. You're doing people wrong. That's your best friend, isn't it? That's the person who's looking out for you. So now you've got an organization that says you're overthrowing governments and mistreating the people in Africa. You're mistreating the people in the Middle East. And now what you're doing in Ukraine, you've overthrown a government. That's wrong. To me, in America, the people who point out what our government is doing are the ones who are doing the best work, because they're saying, number one, they're exercising their constitutional rights. Number two, they're saying to the government, you're doing wrong and you need to change. But they're saying to the American people, your government's doing things that are wrong, and I'm going to give you a list of them. I'm not just going to make blank assertions and say the government's evil and wrong, I don't like it. I'm going to say, look what they did in this country, this country, this country, that country, this country. It needs to change. And a couple of those people ran for office. Don't they have a right? Can't anybody on this chat right now, if you're in America, say, I decide to run for office, fill out the paperwork and run for office? I don't care if anybody agrees with you or not. And then somebody's going to come to you and say, because in the Ukraine-Russia war, or anyone, in the Azerbaijan-Armenia war, you support Armenia. Therefore, you're doing the work of the Armenians and outside government. Meanwhile, we just found out recently that Donna Edwards lost her congressional seat in Maryland, right? She lost her congressional seat. AIPAC put $6 million into one congressional district to defeat her. And another Israeli group put almost 500,000. So they put $6.5 million into our electoral process in, count them, one congressional district to defeat Donna Edwards, because she wanted to stand up for the Palestinians, and that therefore she couldn't be in office. So you're going to tell me that we have some kind of democracy here? that somebody doesn't need to stand up and say that's wrong? That we don't have a problem with people being able to exercise their rights, to take positions on things, and to go to the American people? Donna Edwards had a right to run. And the fact that the Israeli groups put $6.5 million, that's a national record to stop her. So this man comes out and says, we support the Palestinians, we support the Russians, and here's a history of the things that the United States have done to her Black people and people around the world and Muslims and now the Russians and blah, blah, blah. He has a right to take that position, and it should be protected. And here's the key. Nobody, and I'll go back to this. Okay, they're evil, extreme, and blah, 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 blah. They haven't charged any of them with anything. Imagine that. The police come to your door. They break down the door. They throw flash grenades. They got SWAT teams, and the FBI, I'm familiar with them, working before heat teams. They got their heat teams out there with guns ready to blaze. They bring these people out, they handcuff them on the curb. They refuse to show them the search warrant. All of this, and they didn't have any guns. They didn't have any weapons, and they were not charged with a crime of any kind. But you know what their crime was? Their crime was saying that they agree with Russia and that the United States is an imperial globalist power. They're anti-globalist, imperial globalist colonial power, and that they believe that Russia is fighting against the combined colonial globalist imperialist powers. That was their crime. Now you need to be wary, and certainly thanks. I see some people doing some super chats. Thank you for the super chats, and certainly if anybody over there on Rockfin is able to do a tip, I would appreciate whatever you can do to keep the channel going. Don't forget, in the show notes, we've got patreon.com/Garland Nixon. You can buy me a coffee, PayPal, garlandin@gmail.com. All of that stuff is in the show notes. So let me continue. So ultimately, what do I think is going on here? Look, the Democrats know they're going to get crushed. And I use the word Democrats. Now, it's not a party. It's the national security state. The national security state is expressed through the Democratic Party. The oligarchs and globalists are expressed. Actually, they're expressed through both parties. But let me be honest with you. They're expressed. Let me say this real quick before I get to what I think is coming and why we should think of this. All these people have this idea that the Republicans are somehow going to get in office and that they're going to hold the Democrats' feet to the fire. Bullshit. The Republicans, Mitch McConnell, you think he's holding anybody's feet to globalist imperialist feet to the fire? Hell no, he's globalist to the core. What they're going to do, what the Republicans are going to do is they're going to come in and they're going to say, oh, the Biden team's working with China. Why? Because the national security state hates China. They hate China. So they're on behalf of the national security state. They're not going to investigate Joe Biden. They don't give a shit about Joe Biden, and they're a bunch of corrupt globalists themselves. They're going to investigate China so they can say, Biden's doing this with China. If they find dirt, do you think if the Republicans find dirt between Joe and Hunter Biden and Israel that they're going to expose it? Do you think if they find dirt between Joe and Hunter Biden between any other of these countries that the U.S. loves, you think the Republicans are going to say, aha, Hunter Biden's taking money from an Israeli oligarch. We got him now. No. They won't touch that. The Republicans will do an investigation on behalf of the national security state in any way that they can tie Joe Biden to an official enemy, namely China, that is sanctioned by the national security state. They will work on. In fact, the national security state probably is getting a little tired and they want Biden replaced. They will probably help them and give them information. I will damn guarantee you this. The national security state will give the Republicans information tying Joe Biden to China so they can take him out themselves. What do you want to bet? So the Republicans ain't worth a shit to think that they're going to somehow come in and do an unbiased investigation. You are fooling yourself. I'm going to do a video on that later, but let's get back to this. So here's what they do. They start with Alex Jones. Alex Jones had some bullshit with him. He had some things I didn't like, but he had some truths. Alex Jones, I'm not saying Alex Jones. I've interviewed Alex Jones. Alex Jones has asked me to come on his show before. I didn't go on. And to me, people want to know, why didn't you go on Alex Jones' show? I'll be honest with you. You know, Garland Nixon. One thing you don't got to worry about Garland. I tell too much, if anything. The real truth of the matter, and this is why I left Fox. I was going Fox News, right? I was doing a TV show. for Fox. And that TV show aired in Philly and New York and all that kind of stuff. And I was doing all of that. And at that time, I felt like, well, you know, Alex Jones says some stuff that I absolutely disagree with. He says some stuff that I absolutely agree with. He says some stuff that I think's out of fucking in, you know, space. But I support his right to say whatever he wants. Some of the stuff he says is true. And he was one of the few people that was very early talking about the World Economic Forum, talking about globalism. He was talking about this stuff early. So for all the crap he was talking early, he was over the target, at least in some areas. So they had to take Alex Jones out. And when they took Alex, and I didn't go on his show when he personally said, come on the show, I didn't go on. I was in the mainstream media. I was, like I said, Fox News, mainstream media, TV shows. And that's why I didn't do it. Because you know what? Here's the truth. If I really am honest with myself, I knew that if I went on there, that when I showed up for, you know, at the studio, that there'd be some funny eyes, that there would be people that would say, no, and you know, I heard you on Alex Jones, you know. So I just said, I'm not going to bother with it. So yes, I believe, you know, I like to be honest. I believe I was intimidated somewhat by being a mainstream media personality. I was getting a check. I'm going to lie and say I wasn't getting a check. I was getting a check, but that didn't influence me really because I walked away anyway. But so it wasn't about getting a check with me at that time. It was about I really enjoyed what I was doing. And I guess I enjoyed the glamour and the jazz of being on TV and stuff like that. I don't know, whatever. You know, I'm just trying to be honest with you. But ultimately, that's why I walked away, because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And when I realized I am reading from a teleprompter here, when the guy who was the host of the show was off, I would be hosting this TV show, which meant I'm now reading from a teleprompter. And once it got to the point that I was reading from a teleprompter, I just couldn't do that anymore. And I just walked away from whatever it was that was there. That's the truth. I don't care what people think, but I've shared the truth with you. So at any rate, so let me go on. So they took Alex Jones out. But what happened after that? Was he the only one? And there were people like me who said, regardless of what you think of Alex Jones, you should defend his constitutional First Amendment rights. I defended it and I said, this is wrong. And I said, and they're coming for more people. You best believe they're coming for more people. And they took Alex Jones out. And what did they do? They started deplatforming people, left. And people were like, oh, they're only taking out conservatives. And then all of a sudden it's like all these people on the left, oh, they're only taking out the left. And I'm like, no. If you push back against globalism, if you push back against war, if you push back against what the U.S. empire is doing, they're coming after you. It doesn't matter where you are on the ideological scale. It only matters if you're pushing back against what this monstrous globalist monster wants. So these people, apparently, this movement went to Russia. There's a guy who has an anti-globalist organization in Russia, and they went to a event that they had there. That's what they did. They went to an anti-globalist event. Well, they're anti-globalist, and it was in Russia. So what? And they came back. Some of their people ran for office, and they're basically trying to say that they were influenced by Russia. But if you look at the indictment, it's bullshit. It's like they tried to influence the election working with Russian blah blah blah, and they tried to influence people. Wait a minute. As this guy brings about, this organization has been around for 50 years, and they've been advocating for the exact same thing. They're opposed to globalism, imperialism, and all that kinds of shit, right? They got a right to do that. Now, all of a sudden, they do the same thing they've been doing 50 years, and it's, oh, they're working for the Russians. It's because they are open in advocating on behalf of Russia in the Ukraine conflict, and they have a constitutional right to do that. It is because they are now openly advocating for the Palestinians. They got a constitutional right to do that. And here's the part that's important. The Democrats know their ass is grass in November. And what they're starting to do now, this ain't going to be the last. Because there's going to be people that are, oh, well, the Black Uhuru movement, I don't like them. They're terrible. They're extremists. They're this or that. They don't even know what the hell they're talking about. You watch the video and you'll understand. But there are people who are going to look at who are going to not support them, and then their organization. What do you think about antiwar.com? It's a libertarian organization. I'm not a libertarian. I got issues with libertarians, and I got areas of that I love them for, right? But they have a right to stand up and do anti-war stuff. Libertarian organizations, you better watch it. Because guess what? They're going to be knocking at your door soon saying, oh, you're opposing this, what's going on here in Ukraine. Oh, ho, ho. You're working with the Russians. If you've got a nonpartisan, unaffiliated organization that opposes the Palestinians or opposes what's going on in Ukraine or this, or whatever the case may be, see, you should support this movement. You should oppose what they're doing here because this is Julian Assange, and now they're going after more journalists. This is Alex Jones, and now they're deplatforming everybody after Alex Jones. This is the Uhuru movement, an anti-imperialist, anti-globalist movement, and guess what? They're going to be going after even more. You should understand this is not the end of it. This is the beginning of it. And here's what I'm going to do. I think it is critical. I'm going to play as soon as we get past. I'm going to play again what this guy has to say so people can understand. Hold on a second. I am going to let you hear. If you somehow, whatever the case may be, haven't heard and you want to know this movement and you want to know, well, who are the Black Uhurus wherever, what do they stand for? Okay, this is the guy from the Uhuru movement. Are they extremist, madmen, crazy people who don't know anything? Let's listen. Let me add this. Why do I say it's important to listen to him? When the Mueller report came out, yes, it was 600-700 pages, but I read as much as I could without barfing, right? When I believe it was 2015 or 2016, they came out with this bullshit about Russian interference and RT, right? And they released it. And I said, well, let me read it. And I read it. When something comes out, when a new indictment comes out or whatever comes out, right? Most people read the headlines. I read these things because when you read them, you find out it's bullshit. When you look at the indictment that is against the Uhuru movement, you realize this is bull. What are they talking about? This is bullshit. You haven't charged anybody in that organization with a crime. How can you break down their door, throw flash grenades in 5 o'clock in the morning, drag people out in handcuffs, point guns at people, and nobody's accused of a crime. Nobody's even accused of having a weapon. But let's listen to what the leader has to say. And you tell me if you understand. You tell me if you understand why it is that they're opposing them. This is the Uhuru movement. This is a guy named Omali Yeshitela. He is responding and he's talking about what they stand for. Watch this and tell me what you think. Are they crazy psycho? Are they crazy psycho extremists? Check it out.
Important for you to know the role, the advanced detachment, the revolutionary role, the vanguard role of the African People's Socialist Party. They're saying somehow the Russians are responsible for our position. They say this man, Alexander Ionov, who I met in Russia, I went to Russia on 2 different occasions, and I met him at a conference of nations that was involved in the question for self-determination. Black people, African people need to be self-determining, self-governing people in the United States and around the world. They want to keep us fighting against racism and the ideas in the heads of white people. They want to keep us fighting to make white people like us as opposed to fighting for our own power. The African People's Socialist Party was founded something like 50 years ago in May, and for the purpose of continuing the struggle for black people and oppressed peoples around the world against colonialism. They try to destroy the memory of the people that what we are fighting for is against colonialism. And so as the African People's Socialist Party, by ourselves, mostly for 50 years, have been pursuing this struggle against colonialism and uniting with all the peoples around the world. So they said, I went to Russia, but white people go, to occupy Palestine that they call Israel every day of the week. And they work with other white people to steal the land, kill the people, Arab Palestinian people, that they don't say anything about that. And guess what? It's not just the Russians that we support in Ukraine. We support the Palestinian Arabs in occupied Palestine that they call Israel. We support the people who are in Nicaragua who have made their own revolution against U.S. puppets there. We support people who are fighting against oppression everywhere, and we support the Russians in this war that's being made against Russia through Ukraine in an instance when the United States government overthrew the elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and since that time have killed 13 to 14,000 Russians or Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine who support Russia. So this bogus thing that they're saying is requires of people ignorance by people around the world of this history. And it requires ignorance of the people around the world of the role that the United States has played. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that overthrew the elected government of Iran in 1953. They want us to forget it was the United States government that overthrew the government of Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that organized a coup attempt against Hugo Chavez some years ago. They want us to forget that it's the United States government that tried over and over and over again to assassinate Fidel Castro. These are people who were in power in their own governments, but they had disagreements with U.S. foreign policy because U.S. foreign policy was designed to keep them living under colonial domination. And black people here, they think we forgot they killed Malcolm, that they killed Martin Luther King, that they had killed Lumumba, that they overthrew Nkrumah, that they killed Sankara, that they've done all this mayhem around the world. And in 1968 alone, they killed something like 30 members of the Black Panther Party. And in 1969, they murdered Fred Hampton. The Russians didn't do that. The U.S. government did that. And
Well, gee. I wonder why they went after this group. Can't imagine why they'd be upset after this group, huh? So this guy, just said, is there something that he said there that sounds extremist? Is it something that he said there that should be outlawed? That where somebody should break down your door with weapons and come in your house and say, you're not allowed to say that. But the problem is not that he's lying. The problem is not that he's an extremist. The problem is that he's telling the truth about history. When people come to you and they say, look, when they say the war in Ukraine started February 24th, that Putin wants to expand the Soviet Union and attack other countries. He just woke up and he's evil and he's doing it because of evil things. They ignore the fact that the government overthrew the government of that the U.S. government overthrew the government of Ukraine. They ignore the fact that the U.S. government supported literal Nazis, funded armed literal Nazis, and are still doing it in Ukraine. They ignore history that 13,000 plus Ukrainian civilians, almost all civilians, died as a result of shelling and bombing from the U.S.-backed Ukrainian government. Look, this is not Garland Nixon taking some kind of an ideological position. These things are factual and can be researched and documented. So here's my point. I just listened to a guy talk for a couple of minutes, and he said things that I already knew. He talked about the U.S. government overthrowing governments in Africa, the U.S. government assassinating people, American citizens on their own soil. Come on, this is what happened, and he has a constitutional right to say it. So now we've got a situation where, and I'm telling you, it's coming there in November. You know, for a while, I've been saying this. I've been saying come November, you watch. come November, you're going to see the United States government, you coming get towards November, the U.S. government is and the party of the Democrats. That's what I'm going to call them, the party of the Democrats and their allies in the party of the Republicans. All of them. You watch when they start saying yes, the Russians. And guarantee you this, and the Chinese, and they'll probably throw the Iranians in there. The Russians and the Chinese are trying to influence our campaign, our elections, so that when the Democrats get wiped out, the Democrats didn't get wiped out. The Russians and the Chinese did it. The Russians mostly, maybe the Chinese, because everybody knows the Chinese want Republicans to win, right? So they're setting up the scenario so they can then say we didn't lose, the Russians stole it from us in November. If not for the Russians influencing it, blah blah blah, we would have won. And so they're going to try to take this group out. But if you belong to an organization that opposes what's going on, or you're just doing it, or you're on YouTube, or you're on any platform, they're going to start saying that about all of us. It's coming. So that's an opening salvo. That's the first group to go down. And if you think about it, they couldn't even take them down. They couldn't take them down. What did they have to do? They couldn't even charge them with a crime because they have done no crime. They have a right to attend an anti-globalist seminar in any country in the world because they are anti-globalist. They have a right to run people for office because that's their constitutional right. They have a right to advocate against what they believe are colonial powers uniting against Russia and Ukraine. If that's their political position, they have a right to do that. But they want to usurp those rights. They want to start those rights. And it's the camel's nose under the tent, as they say in law, right? The camel wants to get its nose under the tent, and then the rest of the camel comes after it, right? They want to start by going after them. And they can also use race and say, yes, see, white people, a bunch of scary black people. Look at that guy. He's a dark-skinned black man. He's got a hat with a red star on it. Isn't he scary? Ooh, wouldn't want to agree or associate with him. The man's telling the damn truth. He's telling the truth. He's telling the well, let me put it like this. He's telling a truth that's in his heart. But when I say he's telling the truth, I mean when he says the United States killed Thomas Sankara, overthrew the government of Kwame Nkrumah, when he goes on and on and on, overthrew the government of Iran, those are truths. And based on those historical activities perpetrated by the United States, this group has formed the opinion that the United States itself is a rogue government that's going around the world overthrowing the governments and doing things like that. Now, he's a black person, and he has a right to say they're particularly oppressing black folks in Africa and wherever, and we're going to advocate for them. But here's what's interesting. If you listen to what he says, and this is something else I think that's dangerous. He says, no, we're not fighting against racism. He says racism is a concept that's invented in the Western world and the white world and all that, right? Okay. He says we're fighting for people. Think about this. We're fighting for people to be able to, and I'm paraphrasing, people to choose their own path and independence. Think about what he's saying there. He's saying these countries should be sovereign and independent. Now think about what he's saying. He's saying we ain't fighting against racism. The U.S. and you guys created that issue of racism. You created that term of racism. We ain't interested in that. If we're so busy fighting about racism, we're fighting about a issue that is created within the context of the U.S. empire, within the context of colonialism. He's saying we're not fighting against that. We're fighting for independence. That means political independence. That means economic independence. What is he saying? We're fighting for sovereignty. Sovereignty doesn't apply to black nations or red or yellow nations. Right now, you know who should be supporting that? The Europeans, the Germans, the Italians, they don't have sovereignty. Right now, they have no sovereignty. Their country, in the same way, this is important, in the same way that the United States looked at Africa, and when they saw an African country that had lots of resources were doing good, they overthrew the government and they would steal their resources. They didn't do that because they were black. They did that because they had resources and they wanted those resources. They happen to be black. That made life easier. And here's my proof. What the hell are they doing right now? What's the U.S. empire doing to the UK, doing to Germany, doing to Italy? It's doing the same thing that it did to Nicaragua and Venezuela. It's doing the same damn thing that it did to the African nations. Right now, the U.S. empire is showing that it really wasn't just about race in Africa and South America. Because if it was, would they literally destroy, annihilate the economies, the way of life, the cultures, everything of these countries? They're saying to people in Germany and UK and France and Italy, you can't have your own culture. The globalists have created a new culture, and you have to accept that one. A cancel culture and all this crap. You got to accept the culture of the globalists, the culture coming from Hollywood. You got to accept that culture. If you got a different culture, that's unacceptable. Isn't that what they said to the people of Africa? There's no difference. So it's brilliant for them to say, no, we're not fighting racism. Get out of here with that. We're fighting for independence. Because here's the thing about it. If they're fighting for independence, what they're saying is the people of the Congo should have the independence to chart their own course. But doesn't that also mean that the people of Germany and the people of Italy, that the United States should not be able to say, hey, Bojo or whoever, wipe out your own economy. Germany, wipe out. Italy, all you people, stop buying this, stop getting cheap Russian energy so that your people can have a high standard of living, so that your people can enjoy a decent and reasonable life. The U.S. empire says to them, stop that. As of now, you're going into the third world. So now the U.S. is wiping out these countries, sending them into the third world by using, and what now here's the thing. What did he say? One of the things he talked about was the issue of U.S. puppets, right? So what do they do in a lot of these African countries, right? They install some corrupt puppet so that they can steal the resources of the people, and they can impoverish and deindustrialize these countries that are doing well by putting in a U.S. puppet that will not act on behalf of an independent sovereign electorate. Isn't that what they do? Who does that sound like to you? Does Liz Truss or Bojo or Mario Draghi or Olaf Scholz, is any of them, first of all, are any of them poor? No, they're wealthy puppets. They are, as I said about Africa, are they rich? Are they corrupt? Are they U.S. puppets? Are they acting on behalf of the U.S. empire to oppose the people of their countries? It's time. See, I think other countries are starting to wake up. I think some of the other countries are starting to wake up and say, we've been had by the U.S. and we ain't taking it no more. It's time for the people of Europe to wake up and to realize that they are no different. To realize that what has been perpetrated against Africa, what has been perpetrated against, remember, French Indochina, what has been perpetrated against Latin America is now being perpetrated amongst them. And they will be as poor as the poorest country in Africa. They will be as poor as the poorest black or brown country in South America or Africa or anywhere in Europe, if they don't wake up to the reality that they are getting the exact same treatment. And now a man who stands up and says that, and says, I ain't fighting racism, because racism is a concept of the United States government, and racism is a concept of the colonial powers. I'm fighting for independence, that's sovereignty. And the African countries, they're struggling because they don't get independence because of the U.S. empire. The Latin American countries are fighting for independence because they don't have independence from the U.S. empire, and now they're getting it. And it's time for the people of Europe to do the same thing, for the people of Europe to wake up and say, we don't have any, what we thought. They see, the people of the UK and all of the Europe, it's time for them to say, we thought. And we stayed blind. We didn't say anything because we were living good. But we thought we had independence, and that, yeah, the colonial powers are mistreating Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, blah, blah, blah. But at least we've got independence and a high standard of living. And you now are being woken up to the reality that A, you do not have independence, and B, not having independence will cost you that standard of living. Let me tell you something, Europe. There are a lot of people that have said that in the coming year or two, that there'll be food crises in the Middle East and food crises in Africa, and as a result, tens and tens of millions of these people are going to flood into Europe because they want a better life and they're struggling there. I don't believe that. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Europe is going to go to hell the way they're doing it. that Europe's going to go straight to hell the way the U.S. puppets that run Europe are doing it. That hell, it may be the other people the way around. People from Europe may be flooding into other regions trying to get some food. I suspect that Russia and China and India and these other countries, Russia, did you know that Russia sent 20 million tons of wheat to Cuba at no charge? 20 million tons of wheat to Cuba at no charge. Why is that? I believe that Russia and China are going to focus on providing a safety net for the countries in their orbit. I think that Russia and China are going to do the best to ensure that the countries within their orbit don't collapse as best they can, for a number of reasons. Number one, to strengthen these countries' economic position so that they know they're going to be separated from the U.S. empire. And they want to say, look, if we build up Russia and Africa, if we build up their economies a little bit, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Asia, we build up their economies, then we'll be okay losing the U.S. and Europe because we'll have economies that can make up for them and we can all survive together. So I have a feeling that Russia and China are going to act to try to prop up some of these countries that everybody thinks going to fall apart. I'm not saying it's not going to be easy and there's not going to be some problems, but I'm saying I think that's going to happen. We shall see. But I do think, again, in the same way that there are people waking up around the world enough to realize that they're being had and to realize that the U.S. empire is not acting in their best interest, I believe also it's going to happen in Europe, in Canada, in Australia. I think it's going to happen. Australia, I'm not sure about because they got kangaroos, so who the hell knows? But here's my point, and all kinds of weird duck-billed platypus. What the hell is a duck-billed platypus? Is it a duck? Is it a mammal? Is it a snake? I don't know. It's weird. So God only knows about it. If you got a duck-billed platypus in your country, it's going to be hard to wake up. But let's just hope for them. Anyway, enough. I think the people in these countries are already starting to. And here's the trigger. And there were a lot of, to me, people, especially the shit libs, who looked at the truckers in Ottawa and they said, they're a bunch of right-wing maniacs. They're nuts. They're kooks. I watched them. I watched them on video. I have TVs around my house, right? The big screen TVs around my house in different places I have mounted. When the trucker strike was going on, I had that on in every channel, in every place. I walked through my house from this room to that room, this room to that room, wherever there's a big screen TV, right? I would look up and I would have that live video from Ottawa because from my perspective, from a lefty, and when I say I'm a lefty, I'm the kind of old school lefty. As I said, I've told many times, my dad was a longshoreman, ILA, International Longshoremen's Association. My dad wore a hard hat. My dad was able to provide a decent living for his family. He had a third grade education, but he worked hard in the cold, in the hot, to provide for his family in a union and have good benefits and retired. My dad died. You know what my dad did when he died? My dad had dogs. He liked to rabbit hunt. And he could afford it because he had a decent life. You know, my family, we did okay. We started off really, really poor, and then we did okay. He had dogs, and he'd go rabbit hunting. He had a boat. He'd go fishing. He retired. He had a good retirement, which you don't get today. He had time. He had good benefits, which you don't get today. And he hunted, and he fished his little life away until he died at 84 years old. That is what was supposedly the American dream. Put on a damn hard hat, get up in the cold, work hard, provide an education for your children so they can live a better life. And then when you're done at 60, whatever, go fishing, go hunting, do what the hell you want to do. That's what my dad did. My dad, and like, I'm not an anti-gun person. I'm not a pro-gun. I'm not an anti-gun person, right? My dad had his shotguns and all kind of guns. He went hunting. He had guns to go hunting with. He wasn't going out shooting anybody, killing anybody, right? He was a human being who enjoyed hunting, and that's what he did, right? In fact, I don't have any need for guns, but I got a couple of guns that in my garage that he left for me when he died. You can have these, whatever, right? I just kept them as a remembrance of my dad. I don't have anything to do with him. I don't hunt or whatever the case may be. But I get all that. I get going back to the fact that people, all the American people, remember the coal miners in England, right? All the people in the UK, the people in Germany and Italy and the United States and on, want the same thing that my dad had, They want the opportunity to work an honest day and to make an honest living and to provide a little better for their children than they had, or in my dad's case, a whole lot better than they had, right? That's what most of us want to do. People grow up in poverty and they want their children not to grow up in poverty. I remember, let me tell you this. Again, longshoreman, it's a decent living, right? It's not an easy living, it's a decent living. So I turned 18. I told my dad, I said, yeah, Dad, I had a half brother that was in there, my dad's friends, and all of them lived well. All of them, their wives, some of them had other businesses. My dad's best friend, this guy had a tow truck business on the side, but guess what? He had a 30-foot boat down there on the water. He had a Harley. He had all these. I watched. So what did I see? I saw these men working hard, providing for their families, and being able to have some toys and fun and live their lives and all that kind of stuff, right? So I said to my dad when I turned 18, I'm like, Dad, I want to be a longshoreman too. I want to go down there to the docks and blah, blah. My dad said, let me tell you something, son. I said, why? He says, I had to do this. I got a third grade education. You're going to get an education. You're going to do something where you can use your mind. You can use your head, where you can do something that you love for a living and blah, blah, blah. But no, I don't want you getting up in some dangerous job like I did with shit falling off of cranes and smushing people every now and then and all that kind of stuff. No. This ain't the job for you. And I said, okay. And I'm glad he did. I lived a pretty good life and I did very fun things. But here's my point. Here's my point. Here's my point. That's all people in Europe, Africa, Latin America desire. An opportunity to earn a family. And there'll be people in our society who in a wheelchair, their legs, they can't walk. People in our society who have mental illness and they can't take care of themselves. We also need a society that deals with that. They shouldn't be homeless. If you have some kind of severe mental illness and you can't take care of yourself, you shouldn't be wandering the street mumbling with nothing over your throat. You shouldn't be in a rich society like this. If you're in a wheelchair or blind or whatever and you can't work, some woman has 4 kids and her husband dies and he's taking care of the family. In my opinion, in a wealthy country, in a wealthy environment like this, we should make sure that those people aren't suffering. That's a moral position. I think that's all the people in Europe want. That's all the people in Europe want. That kind of a society. That's not what a globalist society gets you, and they're anti-globalist. That's not what an imperialist society gets you, and they're anti-imperialist. That's not what this kind of society that we've created gets you. And now, dear Europeans, you get a taste of that shit for yourself. And it's not very tasty. And I believe they've made an error in going after this guy. I believe that what he's saying is going to be heard by a lot of people. What they're saying is going to be heard by, that there's Black people that are going to listen to him and saying, so they're saying we're not fighting against racism. They're saying that racism is a concept created by the U.S. or the neo-colonial empires, and that they're happy as long as we're fighting against racism, because that's within the Overton window of what's allowed to discuss. He's saying we want independence. Well, every country needs independence, don't they? And you don't have independence in the UK. You don't have independence. So to all of those listening who are around the world, that's why I love what he said, because it aligns with what I believe in. And that is, we must stand up for sovereignty. I may not agree with what's going on in any given country. I don't care if it's Russia or it's China, or it's Saudi Arabia, it's Venezuela, it's the United States. If I'm in an alien and I'm looking at these countries, if I'm in a different country, Chile, and I look at the U.S. and Russia, China, blah, this other country, or if I'm in the U.S. and I see things going in other countries, what I should say is, well, whether I agree with it or not, that's their country, and they're a sovereign, independent nation. A sovereign, independent nation. So here's the problem. If the Uhuru movement is saying we believe that the African countries and the Latino countries, Latin American countries should be sovereign and independent, they're also saying that we believe that the European countries should be sovereign and independent. See, when you get down and talk to people like that, there is a level of agreement at a very molecular level. Here's what I'm with so many people that don't even realize. Here's what I mean. People in Europe, there's a lot of people saying, man, there's all these people from the Middle East flooding in, all these Africans flooding in, and we don't like that. Okay, fine, whatever. People can say it's racist, it's not racist. I don't care what you say. Here's the bottom line. Why the hell are they flooding in? They're flooding in because the U.S. empire goes to their countries, blows things up, funds ISIS, funds all of these, starts and destabilizing, creates chaos. And then these people now flood into Europe. And what happens? There's challenges for jobs. There's misunderstandings because people see the world differently. There's people getting concerned. Man, there's all these new people here. It's different. My country's changing. All this stuff is going on. Why are those people there? Because their country doesn't have independence. Because their country is disrupted. You think that a person who lives in Ghana doesn't want to live in Ghana? What they want is an independent Ghana that economically develops and they can get a decent job and they can raise their family. They don't want to leave and go to, have you seen the weather in the Europe? I've been to London. You seen the weather in London? Who the hell wants to leave some tropical paradise and go to damn London? Or Norway? It's cold. Hell no, they don't want to go. But because their country has been destabilized by the U.S. empire, they leave out of desperation to try to find what I keep saying my dad had. A hard hat, a decent living, able to feed his family. That's all we want. That's all everybody wants. And now it's time for the people of Europe to wake up and say that's what they want too. And now they're being denied the same thing. That's all I'm talking about. So at any rate, that's it. I certainly appreciate it. A lot of people on a day, on a Sunday afternoon, and I appreciate that. So here's what we're going to do. I'm out. I appreciate it. For all of those who feel that they have the ability to keep the channel going, I appreciate that. If you look in the show notes, I'm on patreon.com, and that is patreon.com/Garland Nixon. $5 a month, 10, 100, or whatever you can a month. I appreciate that to keep this channel going, allow me to do what I'm doing. Certainly, and on Rockfin, man, I thank the people on Rockfin. Make sure you smash the like button and go over to Rockfin, and you go over to Rockfin and you become a member of Rockfin, because the way things are going, they're going to throw my ass, or look, let me tell you what my dad would tell you. They're going to throw my black ass off this. That's what my dad would say. They're going to throw me off of YouTube at some time. Let's hope that doesn't happen. And Rockfin, certainly I want you to become a member over there just in case they throw me off. Here's what I'm going to do. Just because I'm this type of dude, I am going to one more time, because I think it's so important for people to hear this. I am going to one more time play what this guy said, so that people who haven't heard about the Uhuru movement can hear it. So you can make a decision for yourself if there's some kind of crazy extremist, if they don't know what they're talking about. Let's hear it one more time. Who is the, what does the Uhuru movement stand for?
It's really important for you to know the role, the advanced detachment, the revolutionary role, the vanguard role of the African People's Socialist Party. They're saying somehow the Russians are responsible for our position. They say this man, Alexander Ionov, who I met in Russia, I went to Russia on 2 different occasions, and I met him at a conference of nations that was involved in the question for self-determination. Black people, African people need to be self-determining, self-governing people in the United States and around the world. They want to keep us fighting against racism and the ideas in the heads of white people. They want to keep us fighting to make white people like us, as opposed to fighting for our own power. The African People's Socialist Party was founded something like 50 years ago in May, and for the purpose of continuing the struggle for black people and oppressed peoples around the world against colonialism. They try to destroy the memory of the people that what we are fighting for is against colonialism. And so as the African People's Socialist Party, by ourselves, mostly for 50 years, have been pursuing this struggle against colonialism and uniting with all the peoples around the world. So they said, I went to Russia, but white people go to occupy Palestine, that they call Israel, every day of the week, and they work with other white people to steal the land, kill the people, Arab Palestinian people. That they don't say anything about that. And guess what? It's not just the Russians that we support in Ukraine. We support the Palestinian Arabs in occupied Palestine that they call Israel. We support the people who are in Nicaragua who have made their own revolution against U.S. puppets there. We support people who are fighting against oppression everywhere, and we support the Russians in this war that's being made against Russia through Ukraine in an instance when the United States government overthrew the elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and since that time have killed 13 to 14,000 Russians or Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine who support Russia. So this bogus thing that they're saying is requires people ignorance by people around the world of this history. And it requires ignorance of the people around the world of the role that the United States has played. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that overthrew the elected government of Iran in 1953. They want us to forget it was the United States government that overthrew the government of Benz in Guatemala in 1954. They want us to forget that it was the United States government that organized a coup attempt against Hugo Chavez some years ago. They want us to forget that it's the United States government that tried over and over and over again to assassinate Fidel Castro. These are people who were in power in their own governments, but they had disagreements with U.S. foreign policy because U.S. foreign policy was designed to keep them living under colonial domination. And black people here, they think we forgot they killed Malcolm, that they killed Martin Luther King, that they had killed Lumumba, that they overthrew Nkrumah, that they killed Sankara, that they've done all this mayhem around the world. And in 1968 alone, they killed something like 30 members of the Black Panther Party. And in 1969, they murdered Fred Hampton. They weren't, the Russians didn't do that. The U.S. government did that. And guess what?
Okay. So, is this guy some kind of a crazy person? Is this guy some kind of a goofball extremist? I think not. I don't think he's a crazy person. I don't think he's an extremist. I think that what he's saying makes sense to me. He's got a, and let me add this, and he's got a constitutional right to say it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter at Garland Nixon, Garland Nixon on Facebook, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, garlandin@gmail.com is my email address. If you see a story that needs to be covered, feel free to send it to me. Look in the show notes. You can support me, buymeacoffee.com/Garlandin, and then an H for some reason after that. So you can do buy me a coffee or you can do PayPal. That information is in the show notes, garlandin@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can do patreon.com/Garland Nixon, $5, $10, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. Make sure you smash the like button. Make sure you follow me on Rockfin just in case I get tossed off of YouTube. And whether or not I get tossed off of YouTube, regardless, follow me on Rockfin. Let's try to support some alternative platforms rather than the platform that is run, by the U.S. government that is directly connected to the national security agencies. Thanks a lot, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I really had a fun time doing it. Peace. I'm out.